everyday witches emerge from the shadows of secrecy. Broom closets are flinging open and witches are taking flight. Whether you are hiding in your cozy closet or flying with pride, stay for a spell as Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon and her guests share magical moments, stir the cauldron, and debunk misinformation and misconceptions about paganism, witches, and our wonderful world of magic.
Hey everyone, we're back with another special guest. Her name is Sarah Tye, and she's an intuitive tarot reader. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm excited. We haven't really talked a whole lot about tarot, so let's talk about the beginning of your journey as a tarot reader.
Absolutely. Well, I've been reading for about 19 years. It started back in high school. And so at the time, it was more of just curiosity. I was coming from a very Christian household. And so I was starting to question my beliefs and see where my beliefs actually fit, because I realized it did not fit with my upbringing. And so originally with tarot, it was more about like jumping into the taboo and the stigma and just like, I want to get into it and figure out what it is. And it was more entertainment. But over the years, I always had a tarot deck around, and it was always available, and I would use it for myself, for my friends and family here and there. But about 7 years ago, I started realizing that tarot was so much more than just entertainment. I was going through a really difficult time in my life, and I finally just pulled out my tarot deck and was asking for guidance, and I couldn't believe how profound the messages were. And not only that, but over time, the more I turned to my cards, the more consistent and relevant. And there are 78 cards in a deck, so when you get consistent, profound, relevant messages over and over again, especially for my logical mind, it was one of those things that I couldn't avoid, acknowledging. And so for the last 7 years, I was really using it just for myself up until 2.5 years ago when COVID started, or when COVID happened. I think many of us were kind of faced with what were we doing with our lives when COVID happened. At least that's how it was for me. I didn't really understand what I was doing with my life and what my beliefs were. I was agnostic, but I didn't have a specific belief system. So I started just kind of dabbling in my own spiritual research and was asking about my purpose at that time. And through that, I kept asking for guidance around my purpose, and tarot kept coming to me. And for a good 6 months, I said no to it. I said, no way, no one would understand it. No one would take me seriously. The judgment, I would get so much judgment. I just kept saying no to it until finally I just kind of felt like Spirit kept tapping me on the shoulder and was like, hey, this is something you're supposed to be doing. And I finally said yes to it. And it was just one of those things that once I started diving into, it's so authentic to me. And I really feel like I'm making a difference in the world. It was really meant for me.
When you were dabbling seriously with the tarot, you found that they were very consistent. Here are 78 cards, and your readings were consistent.
Yes. A good example, many people use tarot or come to tarot for love readings. I think that's one of the cliche, right?
Of course.
Of course. And so I was dating at the time, and there was a person I was seeing, and the cards consistently kept telling me, yeah, he's not the one. He's not going to take you seriously. He's not going to commit to you. I mean, it was over and over. I would pull readings hoping to get a different outcome. And nope, it was like, no, he's not the one. He can't meet you where you are. And so that was kind of my first whoa, it didn't back down. It was very much like, he's not the one. You got to give him up.
So did you give him up?
I did. It took about 6 months, but I finally realized he was not consistent, and he was not ready to commit, just like the cards were telling me. So that was my first look into wow, it's not changing. It's not, just telling me what I want to know. It's consistently giving me guidance.
You started off as a teenager just playing around with the tarot, and then you became serious. How has tarot evolved over the years for you? What's your opinion on that?
Oh, that's a good one. So I love that question. Initially, like I said, it was more for entertainment. It was more for, of course, going from Christianity, I dabbled in immediately like into Wiccan and paganism. And so for me, it was all like mysterious and again, entertainment. But in the last 7 years, it really shifted to more something really, I like to say like healing and medicinal. I like to work so not just with myself, but even in the last 2.5 years, working with people and giving, probably thousands of readings at this point to other people that I've worked with. I work specifically with higher self messages, and it's guidance for what people need to know right now to help them get to where they want to go. In the past, I think I still saw tarot as very predictive, like, oh, it's a predictive style of reading where I'm going to tell someone or I'm going to learn about what my future looks like. But no, and just especially in the last 4 years or so, I've really seen no, tarot is more about the now. There's so much tools to give you now in the present to help you create the future you want. I've really come to this conclusion that I don't think the future is set in stone. I do believe in free will. And I believe that it's what we do in the present, our actions now, that creates that future. So what higher self messages do is they'll give you a roadmap. They'll give you guidance on like where you've been, where you're at, and then how to get where you want to go. And so it's more like tapping into your spirit guides and just getting the clarity that you're right where you're supposed to be, getting the clarity on any blockages or limiting beliefs, anything that could be holding you back from your highest potential.
Explain to us how tarot works. I know that's a broad question, so you just take this wherever you feel you need to.
Yeah. What I've come to my conclusion as far as tarot, it might be a little different than other readers. I mean, there are several elements to tarot. So yes, there are the major and minor arcana. The major arcana is like the trump cards, like the moon, the sun, hermit, things you see in Hollywood, right? And then the minor arcana actually is very similar to playing cards. It suits, and you can actually, fun fact, you can read tarot with playing cards as well. So I mean, it's not the cards themselves. So this is the way that I see how it works. I don't think the cards themselves are magic. I don't think the cards themselves are the thing that's actually speaking to us. I think it's a tool, and I think it's spirit showing up in the middle. And the tool is just the means to share the message. So when I do a reading for someone, for example, I'm trusting that God, modality, whatever modality you believe in, God, divine, universe, it doesn't really matter what that higher power is to you. It's showing up for the person that's asking for the reading. I'm more of an open channel. I remove my ego. So I like to not even think of, I don't want to analyze it or judge it. I just want to focus on what's coming through and just share just what I'm getting without questioning what's coming through, because it's not for me. It's not for me to understand. And so I remove my ego, and I'm just trusting that spirit's showing up for them. And it's all intention. They're showing up with the intention of getting a reading. I'm showing up with the intention of being a channel and sharing the messages that are coming through. So it's not the cards themselves. I really feel like there's a higher power at work when I'm doing these readings. And that's my personal belief. I do think you can dabble in tarot and even oracles without necessarily putting in that spiritual element to it. But I think there's always something there guiding you either way, whether you believe that that's the case or not. That's just been my experience. The more I show up and trust that, okay, this is what they need to hear, even if I don't understand it, even if I don't even want to share what's coming through, I do it because it's not my choice or my place to decide what I should or shouldn't share. So I just trust that spirit's showing up, and over again, I see that it's exactly what they needed to hear. And I get that validation of, okay, that's exactly what I'm supposed to do. And that's exactly how I think that it works.
Sometimes when you give a person a reading and they don't understand what this message is that you're giving them during the reading, later on, do you find out that they figured it out and said, yeah, now I understand what you meant. This is what happened.
Most of the time they understand. It's actually pretty rare. But there's been a couple of times where I've done readings where it was the one person receiving the reading, and then there was an audience, so to speak, like their friends hanging out listening. And there's been a couple of times where they're like, well, I don't really understand that card. And I've had people in the audience go, it's such and such, obviously. And they're like, oh, I didn't even think about that. So, I mean, I've definitely seen it that way where maybe initially someone's like, I'm not sure. And then someone else will chime in. But I want to say probably a good 99% of the time, there's really not a lot of confusion. And I think that's why I've just learned to trust what comes through. Because it's more the opposite, actually. It's more like I won't understand what I'm sharing until they tell me later on, oh, this is how it fits in. So it's more me seeing it make sense later after the fact, when they're like, oh my gosh, so this is what's going on in my life. And not everyone does, share that information with me, but a lot of the times they do. And it makes me, I just see the bigger picture at that point. But initially, I don't even understand what I'm sharing in the beginning. I just trust that it's what they need to hear. And usually there's some kind of a validation on their end on how it makes sense to them.
Over a year ago, I had a tarot reading, and the reader told me that I wasn't using my voice. And I wasn't sure what she meant, because I thought, I give my opinion, I speak my mind. What does this mean? And she said, you'll figure it out. But your voice is going to be your purpose.
Wow.
It was the very next day I woke up and realized I needed to do a podcast. I will be interviewing that tarot reader soon. She doesn't know that her prediction came true. I will reveal that during our episode, which may surprise her. But that was one example of how she didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that meant. But she told me, you'll figure it out, but it's going to be your purpose.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I've definitely, because I don't really get a lot of future feedback because I don't do a lot of predictive readings. So I would love to maybe reach out to my clients and be like, hey, if you have any stories, because that would just be so cool to know. But I definitely have picked up a lot of purpose things do come through in my readings. So I definitely want to look more into that on my end, because I can't tell you how often purpose comes through for people I'm reading for. And of course, it is more predictive in the sense that, hey, your purpose is trying to connect with you. It's like orbiting you right now. I say that all the time. So I definitely wish I had more of a story on that, because I do see those similar things. So yeah, that's amazing. And I do, for my own personal, I see that for myself a lot, but not with my clients in that way. I love that story though.
You don't do predictive readings. Isn't that what most people want? Will I get the job? Will I get the girlfriend?
Yeah, I just don't think the future is set in stone. I think it's always changing based on what we do. So I can look into the energy of the future and say, okay, this is where you're heading as of right now, based on everything right now. And so that's usually how I'll look into it. I mean, I do, if someone's asking about a relationship, I can look into okay, this is where you're potentially heading, but I don't even I don't feel like it's it's far into the future. It's more like maybe a month or two into the near future, because it's so much can change. So, I mean, I do think it's good to know, kind of where you're heading, but it's just not my gift. I would rather empower someone. And I feel like sometimes when we give predictive readings, it can almost feel like now we're waiting around for it. And that could feel very disempowering, because you're waiting to see if it happens. And maybe even knowing that it's going to happen might even shift whether or not it does. But giving more tools on, hey, this is what Spirit Higher Self wants you to know right now, that you can tangibly do now. It gives you something to focus on. It gives you something to help shift your perspective and take you down the direction you want to be.
What types of spreads do you like to do?
I have my own spread.
Oh, okay. That's great.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's funny. I either will just kind of do more of an organic pull depending on the question. But the one that I really like to work with is what I call my higher self spread. And so it's one that I created. And again, it was very organic. It was this particular spread kept coming up. And eventually the meanings of the placements kept being very consistent. So it just kind of created itself. But it's a 7-card spread. It's kind of like an upside down triangle. And there's a theme card, and then there's past, present, future energies, and then the other 3 are higher self messages. That's the roadmap on how to move forward. So that's the one I work with the most. The only other spread that I'll do is like a decision spread, which isn't really again, it's more organic. The placements don't necessarily have meaning per se, but like if someone's asking, should I do this or should I do that? I'll pull cards on one option, I'll pull cards on the other, and I'll just share with them the energies on both. And again, like in that aspect as well, I don't tell people what they should do. I don't do that. I tell them, hey, this is the energy around this option. This is the energy around this option. It's up to your own discernment to tell, to decide which one feels the best out of each of those. Because some people do come to me and they want me to tell them like exactly what to do. And I feel like that's disempowering and that's not my place.
Would you like to do a reading for me as an example for the listeners? Is that something you'd be interested in doing?
Absolutely. I would love to do that for you and let them hear how my readings work and let you experience one as well. That would be amazing.
That would be amazing.
So I can focus on a question, an area of your life, or we could just see what your higher self wants you to know.
I will choose, I want to know what my higher self wants for me.
Have you been wanting to ride your broom like you stole it, rather than hiding in the shadows? Theodora Pendragon is here to help your magic shine, whether you want to show the world your subtle sparkle, or you really want to light your fire. Visit Theodora's online store at witchcasting.shop. That's witchcasting.shop. Remember, there's never been a better time to be a witch.
Okay.
We'll do the higher self option.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a good one. It's so funny because even when people like have a question in mind, but they go with higher self, because they'll tell me later, like that it answered what I wanted it to answer anyways. So higher self is a good one because it just lets you know what you need to know right now.
I love the sound of your cards.
Oh, it's the Lightseers deck.
The what deck?
The Lightseers deck.
Lightseers deck.
Mm-hmm. I work with that one, and then I also have the Muse deck, which is by the same artist, which is funny because they're very different art. Like the pictures are very, very different. All right. So this is going to be my typical higher self spread. It's 7 cards. There's a theme card, past, present, future, energies, and then higher self messages. Feel free to comment as I go if you'd like, or if you'd rather just listen and then comment at the end. Either way is fine. Just don't feel like you can't interrupt me if you want to say something.
Okay.
Perfect. So starting with your theme card, we have the Hierophant reversed. And I love this. This Hierophant is one of my favorite cards because it challenges belief systems that we've been given as like children. That we when we're raised in our culture, we're raised with society's expectations, we're raised with our family's expectations. And the Hierophant really challenges all those things. So right now, your theme is you're basically looking at the way you were raised. Right now, you're going through this period where you're looking at like different belief systems that you've carried forever. And you're starting to realize which ones actually belong and which ones don't. And you're kind of breaking traditions in a lot of ways. So things that you normally would feel like you had to do, you're starting to look at it differently and think, it doesn't resonate with me anymore. Or these beliefs that I was told I should keep believing, it doesn't resonate with me anymore. So you're really like peeling back the layers of what you were taught to carry and believe for years. And you're starting to kind of take away the ones that just don't fit anymore and lean more into what does. Now that does come with, sometimes you get some pushback. Sometimes you get people that are like, what are you doing? You're doing it wrong. Like, for instance, someone who always had a 9-to-5 job decides to do something different. And family could be like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? You're supposed to be working 9-to-5 and doing like, this steady income. And now you're doing your own thing. It's anytime you break away from what's traditional and doing your own thing, that's you listening to your own inner wisdom. But society doesn't always see it that way. So, that usually does come with some pushback. Right now, you're just basically in this period of time where you're going, you know what, this doesn't work for me anymore. And I'm going to take away the things that just don't align. So that's kind of like the period that you're in right now, where you're just doing a lot of shedding of old belief systems and old traditions and ideas that you were told that you don't agree with anymore. looking at your recent past, we have the Eight of Cups reversed. So this one's saying that I feel like what you're going through now, as far as like, what I was just explaining, letting go of old beliefs and more listening to your own inner compass, all of that. I think something in your recent past had to have happened that you had to leave behind. That was actually really hard for you to leave behind. So I think that this stepping into your own discernment that you're doing right now, it kind of came, I don't want to say it came with a price, but you had to emotionally walk away from something. You had to emotionally say, I can't do this anymore. There was a lot of resistance around walking away. It took a lot for you to do so, because it just felt like something that was so, you had to hold on to it or else. And you finally said, I can't do it anymore. And you let it go, which leads us into the present, which is the Two of Swords. This is very, very similar to that Hierophant energy in the sense that the Two of Swords is you learning how to listen to yourself. It's saying that in the past, you probably had people that you went to quite frequently for maybe validation or wanting to make sure that you're making the right decision and asking other people for their thoughts on big decisions you had to make. The Two of Swords is all about unplugging from those voices and saying, thank you for your opinions, but now I'm going to go sit with myself and figure out what feels right for me, because I'm the only one this decision is really going to impact. And so it's coming back to the Hierophant is all about self-governing, self-sovereignty. And the Two of Swords is what you're going through right now, is really learning how to not feel like you need the permission from everyone else to make big decisions and listening more to what feels good for you. Moving into the near future. I love this. So we have the Six of Swords. The Six of Swords is one of my favorite favorite cards, because it speaks to surrender. It speaks to trusting that there's a higher power guiding you. And there's also an element of letting go of control. So imagine like your goals or where you want to get in your life is like an island and you're on a rowboat. You might have this feeling of like, oh, I need to grab the oars. I need to just row myself to the island. And higher self is like, no, drop the oars. Let go of the oars. We'll get you there. You got to trust that you're not alone and we're guiding you. It's kind of like asking to take a back seat a little bit and trusting a higher power to help get you there. And the cool thing is, yeah, you could take the oars and just row straight to the island, but you might miss a couple people you're supposed to meet along the way, or have certain experiences you're supposed to meet along the way. And so it's that surrender to the fact that you're not alone, that you have something guiding you. This is where if you can learn to let go of the control, you'll see more synchronicities, because you're not trying to force yourself somewhere. You're kind of waiting to see how you're going to get there and what signs the universe is giving you to help you get there. So that's kind of like, I feel like right now you're in the space of, like I said, you're cleaning house on beliefs and ideas that you've been carrying for a long time and learning how to listen to yourself. And part of that is going to help lead you to the space of surrender, where you're making that space to trust, where you're not having to always ask other people what you should do. You're actually now asking your higher power what I should do. And then the higher self message to the near future is the Eight of Swords. So there still is a part of you that almost questions whether or not you're allowed to you're allowed to go off course, so to speak, to listen to yourself and listen to your own self-sovereignty versus what everyone else wants you to do. There is still a part of you that feels like you're doing something wrong. And not only that, I think there's a part of you that's also, it feels kind of trapped in that. It even feels like I can't let go and surrender. I don't have time. Or if I surrender, then what if I don't get to the island and then I'm out in the ocean somewhere? You kind of feel like you're a little bit trapped in that you have to force yourself forward. And higher self is, again, encouraging you to let go. So the Eight of Swords speaks to feeling trapped. It speaks to feeling bound. It speaks to feeling like there's only one way forward and that way forward is blocked. It is reversed, which speaks to self-awareness in the sense that you might feel trapped when it comes to surrender and letting go, but you're not. So you're pushing back against that. You are kind of like, I feel like it's not possible, but I'm still going to do it anyway. I'm still going to believe it's possible. So it's like holding you back, and yet you're pushing back against it so you can still work on that surrender piece. The Eight of Swords is all about perception. It's all about knowing that they're looking at the bigger picture and knowing that you actually aren't trapped at all. If you look at the picture here, see, she feels like she's trapped and bound, but that's her reflection, but she's actually not. And so that's kind of the analogy of like where you're at when it comes to surrender specifically. You do feel like it's not possible, and yet you know that's not true. And there's a self-awareness enough around it to kind of push back against that idea. So just watch your mindset around that, because there are lots of ways forward. There are lots of ways to surrender. There's even baby steps, you can do. You don't have to just throw up your hands and be like, okay, I'm fully surrendering. There's little things you could do in a day. Like, okay, what do I need to know today? Universe, give me a sign, show me something in little synchronicity. But that surrender to trust that something will show up is like a good baby step. Your higher self message in the middle. I feel like this is speaking to that past thing that I said you had to let go of that was really hard for you to let go of. There is a sense of injustice around that, around whatever that was. And you're still kind of feeling like something should have been done. This was not fair. This should not have happened the way it did. And the thing with the Justice card, first of all, higher self always wants to acknowledge that, yes, your feelings are valid in that. However, the more you stew in that feeling of unfairness and injustice, you're allowing yourself to get stuck. You're allowing yourself to get stagnant. So, and that could even be speaking to why the Eight of Cups is reversed. It's like I feel like you have kind of walked away, but you haven't fully let go. And the injustice invitation around it is accepting it for what it is. It is what it is. You can't change it. It already happened, but you can choose how you're going to move forward. You can choose the way that you want to, you could choose letting go by accepting what was and not letting yourself get stuck in those feelings. So there is some resistance around letting go, just like there's resistance in letting go from your past. So I do think that that's still something that you're having to process and work through. But the sooner you're able to just accept it and work through that acceptance, it'll be a little bit easier, I think, to listen to yourself, to surrender. It'll open up a little more freedom for you. And then the final card, which I love, is the Page of Swords. This one reminds me of what you shared with being told that your voice is your purpose. So you are learning to advocate for yourself. Like that, I feel like that's a big part of you peeling back these old layers and belief systems that you've been carrying, is learning to say, that's not for me. I know I've been carrying it for a long time and I thought I was supposed to, but that's not for me. And just learning to speak your truth and trusting your experiences and ideas and all of that, especially in this arena of growth and evolution, and letting go of, like I said, old belief systems that just don't serve you anymore. So that is everything that came through.
What I'm getting with this reading is that I'm letting go of the old traditions, the old rules that I followed all these years, and now it's time for me to listen to my higher power telling me to live in the moment and take opportunities as they come and not to fight it.
Yeah. Yep, that's pretty much it, summed up in a nutshell.
Am I right? Did I interpret that okay?
You did. That's a really good summation of it, yeah.
So I need to be a rebel.
I feel like you already are. I feel like you already stepped into that. Since it's just the look at the past and the theme card, I think it's like you're learning how to own it.
Own it. Yes. That was a very good reading. Very interesting reading.
Thank you.
And this is your spread. This is the one that you have invented for yourself.
Yes.
That's really nice that you have your own spread. So you're not traditional either.
No. And the way that I read cards is not, some of the cards that I read, I don't do traditional, like Rider-Waite style, old school tarot. I think that what I needed was, I needed to have more of that freedom to connect with my intuition. So when I read for several years, even up 3 years ago, before I started doing this professionally, I would still pull out my booklet for when I'd read for myself or my friends, or I'd, Google, what does this card mean? Each card, and depending on the reader, there's many different ways you can interpret just one card. You can use it as personification. You can use it as predictive. You can use it as like love, career, purpose. I mean, you could do so many different things with just one card. And for me, it was too much. It was too hard for me to connect in that way. I actually took a course with someone, she's a very well-known tarot reader as well, named Lindsay Mack, and she has a podcast called Tarot for the Wild Soul. And I took one of her courses, and she does what's called soul tarot. And so the meaning of the cards for her, they just resonated with me. It was like, oh my, it was so funny because like I literally had them all memorized within the first day of learning the cards. That's how it just was like, this is it. And I mean, since then the cards have evolved. I've learned a new system on how to read them. Like, it's definitely not the same as it was when I started, but I think that that's important to anyone who wants to read tarot and anyone who wants to do what I do. Don't feel like you have to fit into a box with that either. It's very important to keep your intuition open and to do what feels right for you. I mean, there are times where even in my spread, and even if it's a certain card, the card in the spread and the placement won't even read to me that way. Like, there are times where I'm like, oh my gosh, why am I getting a different meaning from that than what I normally would share? And I share it and the person's like, oh my gosh, that's what I needed to hear. And it's like, okay, well, that's why it spoke to me differently than what it normally would. And that's intuition coming through. So I think that that's important to have your own, to do it the way that works for you. And that's me. That's how I do it.
Let's talk about misconceptions about the tarot.
Yeah, absolutely.
What misconceptions have you heard of or have been told or are aware of?
I mean, I think some of the obvious ones are it's the devil's work. That's like the first one I get from a lot of people who don't understand it. And I have to share with them, like, no, it's in love and light. It's higher, like, that's not the same. And I think that just from anyone who listened to me giving you your reading, they can clearly see this is not the devil's work. Another one I'll get is like, people will be terrified of the death card, for instance. They'll think, oh my God, it means I'm going to die. And no, it just speaks to change. Death is literally just change and transformation. It doesn't, in endings and new beginnings, it doesn't actually speak to immortal or mortal death or any of that. It's actually one of my favorite cards because it really just speaks to, think about the caterpillar becoming the butterfly. It speaks to that transition. Or I think that some people think that there are scary cards versus like good cards. So good and bad cards. And I don't prescribe to that either. I think that all cards are medicine. And I think it's just some cards are a little more bittersweet than others. But it's all there to help you reach your highest good. Like the Tower could be really scary for some people. But again, the Tower is just showing you that there's something that's got to go. That like it's wreaking havoc in your life. It's saying, hey, if this thing doesn't disappear from your life, you're going to have a catastrophe on your hands, so to speak. And whenever I see that Tower and whenever I share the Tower with clients, they already know what it is. Like, that's the thing that gets me every time is they're not like, oh, what could that be? They're like, oh, I know what that is. And so it's just letting them know, like, this isn't just a bad habit. This is something that really needs to go, or else Spirit's going to shake it up until you kind of have to let it go. You know what I mean? So everything has a good positive side to it. It's just sometimes there's a little more of a heavier message first.
Where and how do you do your readings? In other words, how can people find you if they would like a reading?
Yeah, I work virtually a lot of the times. I sometimes I'm local, but mostly I'm virtual. So you can find me on my website, which is journeythroughtarot.com. And I offer different kinds of readings. I do email readings. This is like if you don't want to interact with me directly, but you want to send me a question. In that case, I will respond back with a voice recording of the cards that I pulled with the pictures that I pulled, and send it back to the email within 24 hours. So that's like pretty convenient. You don't have to like schedule with me. You don't have to really talk to me other than sending the question. It's really, really simple. And then I also do sessions, private sessions. So anyone that wants like to do a reading like what I gave for you, I offer 15-minute sessions, 30-minute sessions, and hour sessions. And that's all, again, on the website. It doesn't really matter if it's through Zoom, if it's in person, or if it's through email. The readings still come through and they're still very potent and profound.
Your website is journeythroughtarot.com. Where can they find you on other social media?
I am on TikTok under Journey Through Tarot. I'm on Facebook under Journey Through Tarot, but the one I'm on the most is Instagram. And again, it's also under Journey Through Tarot. So that name follows me.
Journey Through Tarot. I will put all those links in the episode notes so people can find you. Thank you for your intuitive reading And thank you for sharing with the listeners a little bit about tarot, and hopefully some of the listeners will reach out to you for their own reading.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about tarot, and thank you so much for letting me be here.
You're very welcome.
Thank you for joining us for Witchcasting with Theodora Pendragon. Have a burning question or have a topic you'd love Theodora and her guests to discuss on the show? Contact her through Instagram at Theodora Pendragon. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And help us spread the word by leaving us a rating and review and sharing it with your friends. See you next time, and may your magic always shine.